This is the Spanish Taxes Overview 2025 webinar. I am Bruno Bianchi Sarcone of Spainguru.es. And a little bit about Spainguru. Our objective is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. As you can see there, we have nice reviews. We're trusted by the people who uses our partners or who are members of our communities. As you can see, we have more than 10 years in the business, so you are in good hands. You can use Spainguru in two different ways. You can use Spainguru absolutely for free. And also you can use our partners that are personally vetted by me, who have stellar reviews. You can find their immigration experts, of course, tax advisors and financial planners. And if you plan to apply for visas, you will need probably private health insurances, medical certificates, phone translations, apostille services, and other auxiliary services like bank accounts, money transfer services, property rentals, maybe mortgages, and more than 100 services that you might need if you plan to move to Spain or are already living in Spain. But as I said, there's so many free resources in Spainguru. You can join our weekly newsletter that I send every single Monday with the top discussions and most watched video in our YouTube channel that features more than 850 videos that you can join today. It's absolutely free. Read our blog with more than 1,600 articles, and of course, our Facebook community with an aggregated total of 140K members. Those are many members with Spanish immigration, autocratic visa, dedicated groups, digital nomad visa, and much more. Going back to the webinar, this presentation is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or tax advice. Please consult with a qualified tax advisor or legal professional for personalized guidance. You can find recommended tax advisors on Spainguru.es. Spainguru is not responsible for any errors or outcomes from using this information. And again, for people who are just joining, you can write any question at any time in the chat box at the bottom right corner of the screen. Make sure to add a question mark so I can easily see the question after the presentation. Now, what are this webinar's objectives? You read and heard the disclaimer. I'm not a legal advisor. So what can you take out of this webinar? Well, actually, many things. But let's set clearly the expectations. Number one, I hope that you gain an overview of Spanish taxes and understand the key tax categories in Spain and learn the basic principles of taxes in Spain. Second, I hope that this webinar will prepare you to have informed conversations when you engage with tax advisors, something that I hope you do more effectively, and you are able to ask more precise questions to them. Because sometimes, when you engage with a professional in another sector from, what is familiar to you, sometimes it feels like you speak different languages. I hope that this webinar will enable you to speak the same language with your tax advisor or in a consultation. Third, clarify the role of this professional tax advice. Please understand that this webinar provides general information and it will never replace personalized tax advice. Recognize how individual circumstances can significantly impact tax liabilities. And also being Spain a very, let's say, fragmented country in terms of laws and regulations, it also will impact a lot where you move in Spain in terms of your tax liability and the time of the year and so many different things. Identify key considerations for expats. So you will learn about potential tax implications, especially focusing in US and UK nationals, but not only them, okay? Basically, any non-EU national that moves to Spain and potentially becomes a tax resident in Spain, this webinar is for you. Be aware of compliance requirements and deadlines in the calendar to avoid potential penalties. So all this, I hope you will get out from this webinar. Let's speak about probably the most important concept that you need to memorize, Spanish tax residency. How do you establish tax residency in Spain? The most important condition, if you spend more than 183 days physically in the country within a calendar year, that is from January 1st to December 31st, you will become a tax resident in Spain, okay? And there are also two other conditions. If your center of economic interest is in Spain, you could also be a tax resident in Spain. That is, if you have family living in Spain or your main income source is from Spain, right? So according to the first condition, the 183 days rule, if you arrive after July 2nd on a given year, you will avoid making yourself a tax resident during that calendar year. because you're going to be spending only 182 days physically in Spain. But be careful, make sure to verify your travel records, because prior stays in Spain, regardless of immigration status, that is, maybe you came to Spain on a scouting trip or as a tourist earlier in the year, those days count too. Okay, and also sometimes, depending where you come from and in which circumstance you come to Spain, you could be considered tax resident in two different countries. For that, you need to check also the existence of double taxation treaties for guidance on tiebreaker rules in case of tax residency conflicts. Okay, now what are the consequences of being a tax resident in Spain? You will be subject to taxation on worldwide income and potentially net value of your assets on December 31st. If you are a non-tax resident for a given year, only income and assets sourced from or located in Spain are taxable. We're going to talk more about that, especially for digital nomads who move to Spain and don't become right away residents, tax residents in Spain, but are working in Spain. There are tax liabilities for them. A little bit about non-residents. There are two groups. If you are an EU, European Union, EEA, or associated countries of European Union passport holder, there are different tax rates as non-residents for different types of income. For example, if you have a rental, if you own a property in Spain, you will pay 19%. You can deduct certain expenses. But if you are a non-EU national, then that rate goes up to 24%. And that's a flat rate as a non-resident in Spain for income sourced in Spain. In this case, we mentioned rental income. Now, we're going to talk about the tax systems and obligations, or also called regimes in Spain. There are two regimes, the general tax regime and the special tax regime. Within the general tax regime, we find the personal income tax, or in Spanish, IRPF, Impuesto sobre la Renta de las Personas Físicas. There is also within the general tax regime the wealth tax, or Impuesto sobre el Patrimonio, which is taxes over the net value of your assets, the solidarity tax, which is a national wealth tax, okay, with a higher threshold, and there is an informative form called 720 for the declaration of your overseas assets value. We're going to look at all those in detail later on. Then there is the special tax regime, also called the Beckham Law, which is for special situations. Not everyone is eligible when moving to Spain for this special tax regime, and it mostly applies for relocation to Spain for work purposes as an employee, not as a freelancer or contractor. That's important. There are exceptions, but those are extremely rare. Now, a little bit about the special tax regime. There are advantages, pros, and cons, okay? The main pros, you probably heard about them. A flat 24% tax rate, just as the non-resident tax rate, will apply to employment income, and a non-Spanish income is exempt from taxation, okay? Now, there's no requirement to submit the 720 informative form or pay the wealth tax. Now, there are some cons for this special tax regime. Tax savings for earnings lower than 55K in euros are minimal. So experts recommend, if you're eligible, to apply for this special tax regime only if you're making more than these thresholds, because there are additional administrative burden that may outweigh the benefits. And there are no family deductions or allowances. So there are a few things that you will get a certain impact, and depending how much you make, it will make sense to apply for this special tax regime, also called the Beckham Law. Now, let's go through the different obligations. The first tax obligation that you have, especially when you move to Spain and once you become a resident in Spain, is declaring your overseas assets by reporting the form 720. You don't have to pay anything, but you will have to inform the tax authorities about the net value of your assets and rights held abroad outside of Spain, okay, in different categories. The categories are, for example, bank accounts, investments, properties, cryptocurrencies, form 721. And you will have to inform of their existence and submit details about them if any of the categories that I mentioned, and many more, have a net value of more than 50,000 euros. That is, if you have 10 bank accounts with 5,000 euros in each, you will have to declare those 10 bank accounts, because in total the category will be 50,000 euros. Okay, so during your first year in Spain, there will be a requirement of a full disclosure of your overseas assets. Especially the tax authorities will want to have this to calculate your wealth for potentially applying wealth tax, solidarity tax, and eventually they may deduct that you will generate some income because of the type of assets that you have abroad. So it could have personal income tax repercussions, okay? And in subsequent years, after you have presented or submitted the first 720 form, you only have to submit it again if there are changes of over 20,000 euros in any of the categories or asset closures. The deadlines, we just been through the deadline less than 1 month ago. It was March 31st, okay? So for March 31st, 2025, you need to declare your overseas assets on 720 by December 31st, okay? And if you work with a gestor or a tax advisor or an accountant, you normally start to prepare this form on January 1st, okay? Now, there is a second tax obligation, probably the most important one, which is the income tax, or IRPF. Taxable income. You have two different types of income for the income tax. You have ordinary income or general income and investment income with better tax rates. Now, for the ordinary income, you have progressive tax rates applied as brackets. We will see how you calculate those. And among this type of income, you have salaries, rental income, business earnings. As investment income, you have dividends, interest, capital gains tax. Okay, as I said, the rates are lower. They recently added a higher rate for the top bracket, which is now set at 30%. Now, the deadlines to file this income tax is June 30th, and you file by June 30th, 2025, your income for 2024. And usually the preparation begins after April 1st or April 20th for autonomous, because you normally have to also, you have to file taxes as an autonomous on a quarterly basis. So until April 20th, you will have to file that quarterly income, okay? Now, for US citizens, as you know, you have to file your income taxes on April 15th. So you must continue to file taxes in the US if you're a US passport holder, and you will request, this is automatic, in fact, it is not properly a request because it's automatic, but you will get a filing extension when you live overseas, and that goes until June 15th, if I'm not wrong. So if you submit your income tax for Spain before that date, you will get your receipt and your credit. You will credit what you paid to the tax authorities in Spain towards what you have to pay in the US, which usually will be zero because you have paid most taxes in Spain first for that year, okay? And then you will complete your filing form 1040, as I said, deducting those taxes that you paid already in Spain, okay? And a lot of people ask, what should I do? First, declare the Spanish taxes as a US national, or should I declare first the American ones? You can do either of them, but the correct thing to do is to declare the taxes in your country where a tax resident first, okay? That would be Spain in that case, and it will be easier for you then to credit what you paid, because if you do it the other way around, there could be mistakes and potentially you will pay more. It is true that you have, in order to get your extension to file your taxes in the US, you will pay some interest, but that's probably very small amount of money for avoiding any mistakes and doing things correctly. Now we're gonna go back to the tax brackets or progressive tax rate for income tax, just so that you understand what it means, this progressive tax rate. Because just to make round numbers, people are very scared of taxes in Spain, and they are right to be, but some people are maybe too scared because, for example, if you make 100,000 euros, people say, oh, that falls into the bracket number 5. In the right, you will have the column with the different tax brackets. As you can see, it starts at 19% up to 47. And the fifth bracket, it's 45%. 100K would be inside that bracket, right? But it doesn't mean that you will pay 45% for all those 100K of income. I'm not talking about, this is for taxable quantity or amount after deductions and allowances, etc., etc. But just to make a round number for information purposes only, if you look there, the first 12,450 euros that you make, your income, you will pay 19%. Then the following 7,500 euros, you will pay 24%. The following 15,000 euros, you will pay 30%. So that will make that effectively, you will be paying around 36% tax on your taxable income, okay? That's far away from 45%. It's still high, but it's not 45%. I made this calculation from different amounts of income, just again, ballpark figures for illustrative purposes only. But if you're making of taxable income 30,000 euros a year, you will be paying around 24%. And as you can see, it goes progressively going higher, okay? As the more you make, the more percentage you pay. Go and finalizing with 36% effective tax rate for 100K of taxable income after allowances, etc., etc. Now, let's talk about the third tax obligation. Wealth tax and solidarity taxes, okay? So wealth tax is a regional tax. We have 17 regions in Spain, and each of the regions have different rules for the wealth tax in that specific region. Now, the solidarity tax is a national wealth tax, okay? And they kick in at different thresholds. The first wealth tax will have different thresholds depending on where you live, and the national solidarity tax has the same threshold for all. Having made that distinction, you will pay potentially tax on the net value of your wealth as of December 31st, the previous tax year. As we say, the different regions have different thresholds, so you will have allowances that start at 500,000 euros, for example, Catalonia, or 700,000 euros in other regions. And in some regions like Madrid and Andalusia, they have higher exemptions. For example, the wealth tax in Madrid has the threshold starts at 3 million. So the Madrid government just equalized it to the threshold of the solidarity tax, which is 3 million without allowances, okay? And in Andalusia, I think you have 700,000 euros threshold. You need to file it, but then you will have 100% tax rebate. That means that you will inform the authorities of your net value of your assets if they are above your the threshold, and then you will not pay anything. And also, there is something you have to have in mind, which is the 60% rule, which is a little bit complex to understand and even more difficult to explain. But basically, this is a tax rule that will limit the wealth tax liability to up to 80% of your wealth tax, depending on your circumstances. That is especially applicable for people who have a lot of wealth, big wealth, but small income, okay, small amount of income. So when you have small amount of income, the wealth tax gets reduced in order not so that you don't pay all your income into wealth tax. So it's not very well explained, but this is something that I want you to have in mind, that there is this 60% rule, and if that is your situation, have it in mind to talk with your tax advisor. Now, the deadline for filing the wealth tax is June 30th, and the solidarity tax is July 31st. As we said, this tax is not regional, it's national, and will apply everywhere where you move to Spain, but the threshold is much higher. Starts at 3 million, plus allowances, plus deductions. And for one of the deductions that you can have, for example, is if you own a property in Spain, you can deduct up to 300,000 from the taxable income for these types of taxes. And here I have made a calculation for an hypothetical case of someone who lives in Catalonia, which has the lowest threshold, 500,000 only of non-taxable amount for wealth tax, but owns a property in Spain and has deducted 300,000 euros from the taxable income. And there you can see, for example, if this person owns assets at December 31st of €1 million, he will not pay wealth tax for 500,000 plus 300,000 of the property value, and only the taxable amount for the wealth tax will be 200,000 euros, and the total wealth tax due will be around 500 euros. As you can see, 1.5 million euros minus the allowances will be 3,000 euros per year, 2 million, 8,000 euros per year, 2.5 million will be 14,000 euros a year, round numbers. Remember that at the end, you have a Q&A session. When I end this presentation, make sure to ask your question in the chat box on the low right corner of your screen. Make sure to add your question mark so I can easily see your questions, if you have any, of course. And if you like the information that I'm sharing with you today, if you think it's helpful and contributes to have a clearer picture of Spanish taxes, make sure to leave a review on Trustpilot. It makes a world of difference for me, and it only takes you 5 seconds to do. Let's go back to the webinar, tax considerations for digital nomads. So I have here 3 slides that I'm going to go very quickly about digital nomads, because they are a pretty particular case and tends to be a bit complex, and there's so many different opinions even among the experts, right? So there are 2 ways to come as a digital nomad or the teleworkers visa to Spain. Either you come as an employee from a company abroad, or you come as a contractor, okay? It is much more common to come as a contractor for every country except the UK, right? So first case scenario, you come as an employee. You will need to pay Social Security contributions, okay? And those are made in Spain unless the employers lacks a local presence, in which case, if the employer is outside of Spain, which is the most common case, you will either, this employer will have to register for Spanish Social Security or issue or submit a certificate of coverage called A1. At the moment, only the UK A1 is accepted and lasts between 1 year or 2 years, in fact, okay? And lately, we have been some successful cases of American W-2 workers, okay, or employees, where the certificate of coverage from the US was accepted. In the last week or 2, I have seen a couple of cases which are extremely rare, but they're happening and growing. So that opens, there's a silver lining in the cloud. Now, the Beckham law benefits are available only to employees, as we said, for 99% of cases, and not self-employed or contractors. You will have to file your taxes on June 30th for general tax regime, which is the IRPF, Form 100. And if you are applying for Beckham law, it's Form 151. And as we said, you start preparing your taxes on April 1st. Now, if you move as a digital nomad or teleworker as a contractor, you are technically working under commercial agreements in Spain, and you're considered self-employed, called autónomo in Spain, which is what I am, actually. I'm a single person with a business, and I pay my own taxes. And you will be required to contribute to Spain's social security system, okay, which provides you access to the Spanish public healthcare and pension benefits. So when you apply as a contractor or autónomo, you basically promise that you will register with the Spanish authority as an autónomo, and you don't have to apply with the private health insurance, because you will have public access to the public healthcare in Spain. Of course, that's another story. If you want to get a private health insurance to have a more complete coverage, that is also up to you. Contractors are not considered employees, and you will be responsible for managing your own tax filings and social security payments. And for 99% of the cases, you will not be eligible for Beckham law. The deadlines, you have 2 types of deadlines, because sometimes digital nomads or people who come to work to Spain, they move in the second half of a year, spending less than 182 days in Spain. So the first year you will be non-resident, and you will have to pay tax as a non-resident with different deadlines, quarterly deadlines, and then you become a resident after the first year, and then you have a little bit different obligations, let's say, or schedule, right? And here's a case study. And with this, I'm going to finish it with digital nomad. But this person, this is a real true case from my dedicated digital nomad visa group. In September 2024, the person arrived to Spain 1 month after applying for DMB, 1 month after got it approved, and 1 month after registered as autonomous. That is in the second half of the year, as we said, July 2nd. Only there are 182 days in the year. So this person was non-resident in 2024, right? And this is in black, you have a screenshot of an experienced tax advisor, a CPA, who said, for tax questions, if you ask 10 different people, you get 10 answers. This is a particularly gray area, as you weren't resident until you got the TA card, which is the resident card, the plastic card with your face, and you had to put your fingerprints in the police station. So you weren't even officially allowed to work. You're supposed to pay tax in the country where you're physically working, which is maybe what you mean by address. So strictly speaking, on any work performed since September. So this person will have to pay taxes on their income for work sourced from within Spain. So this person was working in the laptop on Spanish soil, has to pay tax as a non-resident for that income, and then once it becomes resident the following year, just pays as a resident. Okay. Now let's go back to the general public. Let's talk about additional taxes in Spain that I want you to have in mind. One that is very important: inheritance and gift tax, impuestos sobre sucesiones y donaciones. It is paid by the heir or recipient, and there are tax reductions and exemptions that vary by region, and this tax is very different depending on where you live. Actually, Madrid and Andalusia are the best regions for this tax, again, not only for the wealth tax. There is also the transfer tax, or impuestos sobre transmisiones patrimoniales, ITP, which applies for second-hand property purchases. New properties pay VAT of 10%, but the transfer tax is for second-hand, and you have to pay this tax within 60 days of the property purchase. It is a regional tax, which has also different rates. The best region is Madrid with only 6% ITP. In Andalusia, is close to 7%, but it's something that you have to have in mind when you buy a property in Spain, okay? And as a general rule of thumb, when you buy a property in Spain, make sure to have at least 10% more of the property purchase price, because that will be the transfer tax, plus also other expenses like realtor's fee, notary expense, etc., etc. So 300,000 euros you will pay in Andalusia. 21%, that is, 7%, 21,000 euros just as transfer tax, and you have to do it within the first 2 months. Different from the US, that you pay this tax when you sell your property, maybe many years later. But here in Spain, they want the money right here, right now, very quickly. Now, there was a very concerning announcement by the Spanish Prime Minister, Mr. Pedro Sánchez, that proposed in a political meeting, it was not a legal proposition, to raise the transfer tax to 100% of the value of the property. Not doubling the tax, but increasing to 100% of the value of the property to the non-European nationals who are non-residents. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in the next slide. Now, let's talk about the property tax, which is the EB, or Impuestos sobre Bienes Inmuebles, which is quite low compared to the US or the UK. Here, maybe for a 100 square meter property, you will pay 350 euros per year, which is absolutely nothing compared to the US, where I hear some people pay $1,200 per month as property tax, and this is a fourth of that, and even per year. So divided 4, divided 12. So it's absolutely nothing compared to what you guys are used to in the US. Now, municipal capital gains tax, impuesto sobre el incremento de valor de los terrenos de naturaleza urbana, or also known as plusvalía municipal. When you sell your property, you will be making a gain most of the time, hopefully. Okay, well, that gain pays a tax that is called plusvalía. And this is something also you want to avoid. If you become a tax resident in Spain and you sold your property during the same tax year outside of Spain, you may be liable to pay capital gains tax in Spain. We're going to talk about how to avoid that, because it tends to be much higher than the countries where we are talking about, the US, UK, Canada, and so on and so on. We mentioned that Mr. Pedro Sánchez scared everyone, every non-EU national at least, to raise 100% to 100% of the property value, the transfer tax. Okay, I have 3 videos about this where I talk a lot about this. You can watch them on youtube.com/@Spainguru. It's absolutely free. The channel is free. I publish every day 1 video about different things, many of them about taxes and so on, and news like this one. And I have interviewed Ainhoa Manero from Stern Abogados, expert in immigration lawyer, and Marcos Gonzalez, who is an expert tax lawyer, okay, about this. If you want to hear more about this, you can watch the videos. But basically, it's not impossible, because you know that experts never say the word impossible, but they say it is highly unlikely that this will happen, because something like this will go against European sovereign rules. You cannot basically make a difference between the different passport holders in terms of taxation, because that would be against some organic and main rights within the European Union. So let's not be scared about that. Timing to avoid capital gains tax, or CGT, on property sales. So I heard that many regions outside of Spain, some states in the US, don't even have capital gains tax. So it would be very disappointing to be liable to pay capital gains tax in Spain, which can be quite high. As we said, it could be up to 30%. Progressive tax brackets in the end is not, but it could be 20%. It is very common, okay, depending on how much the net gain that you are making on the sale of your property. So try to avoid it. The best way to avoid it, there are allowances and ways to mitigate this tax. If you reinvest this money, if you buy property in Spain with the money that you made, if you're older than 65, so many ways. But the best way is time your sale and when you move to Spain, so that the sale basically doesn't fall within the same tax year that you become a Spanish tax resident. First option, the first bar, you sell in 2024 and you move to Spain in 2025. That's it. Or if you sell during the same tax year, make sure that you spend less than 182 days during that tax year, because if you sell on January 1st, for example, and you move to Spain on July 1st and you stay every single day until the end of the year, you would be liable for CGT on your sale of your home in the US or UK on January 1st. Of course, you will credit those taxes and everything, but if you paid a lot in Spain, you will have huge credits in the US for taxes that maybe you wouldn't have paid in origin or much lower rates. There you can see the progressive tax rates for the CGT. And as we said, there are ways to mitigate this tax, but the best is to avoid it altogether by timing your move to Spain. Now, another $1 million question. Is your pension taxable? I just published a video this week about this. Now, the pension is taxed if you are a Spanish tax resident. That is, if you spend more than 183 days physically in Spain within a calendar year. Now, there are thresholds for declaring pensions. If you only have an income source, it's 22,000 euros annual threshold. But if you have multiple income sources, for example, you have different pensions, etc., then the threshold goes down to 12,000 euros for the first income, or 1,500 euros for a secondary source of income. And also something important, pensions from abroad appear as a second payer, even if you only have one source of income. So if they're greater than 1,500 euros, you must declare. Again, for income tax, this is ordinary income, progressive tax rates from 19% to 47%. You know how to calculate those progressive tax brackets. And there are specific rules for the US and UK nationals and any other country that has double taxation treaties, which is the case of the US and UK national. For example, both work the same way. Social Security and private pensions are taxable, but government pensions are exempt in Spain unless you're a dual citizen holding a Spanish citizenship. But this is also arguable. For example, I know Manero says that this is not true and can be fought in court. So really, there's not clear cases about this. If you gain Spanish citizenship, what happens to your taxation of your non-taxable income due to Spain double taxation treaty? Because supposedly when you get your Spanish passport, you have to renounce your US citizenship, something that it is testimonial, is not real, and is not anything that anyone does. Okay, and it is expensive to do, and it's a whole process to renounce to your US citizenship. So it is, maybe we're going too far away from the question, but it's something to have in mind. In the UK, also works the same way. The taxation treaty says that the state and private pensions are taxable, but public sector pensions may be exempt in Spain. So you need to consult with a tax advisor to make sure that your incomes may be exempt or not. Okay, you have allowances for pensioners. Ages 65 to 74 is 6,700 euros annual allowances, and over 75 years of age, 8,100 euros annual allowance. And also another $1 million question: taxation of American 401k and Roth IRA in Spain. So the 401k taxation distributions are taxed as general income at progressive rates, as we said, from 19 to 47%, traditionally exempt from Modelo 720 reporting and wealth tax, but caution is advised due to evolving interpretations, and I really seen different answers from tax experts about whether to declare those distributions, whether to declare the full amount of your 401k in the 720 or not. So caution is advised. Roth IRA taxation, investment gains tax as income at progressive rates, must be reported on Modelo 720 annually based on the account surrender value of December 31st, subject to wealth tax with rates varying by region. Again, wealth tax is by region. And key considerations, there were recent rulings. It's not really a ruling, it's a consulta vinculante. Somebody asked the official interpretation to the tax authorities in Spain about whether the IRAs and 401ks should be reported in Form 720, and the tax authorities in Spain said yes in this document, but these tax authorities are not judges and they are not legislators. They said yes, but this could be fought in court. They may not be right, but it is true that there is this document that says this. So something to have in mind as well if you're a holder of 401k, Roth IRAs, etc., etc. As I said, seek professional advice. You can find recommended tax advisors for Spain and US and tax planners in Spainguru.es, and try to avoid any penalties. Always be in the safe side if you can. And I have a lot of content about this, as I said, blog posts, videos. There you have the QR codes. Take your time, go on Spainguru.es, search the tag taxes, and read all that information, because it will certainly be useful even before deciding to make a move to Spain, to have a full, clear picture of the implications of moving from a tax perspective. And here I try to condense everything in one single page. I know it is very noisy, but imagine Spanish taxes in only one page, just for you to remember. This is the cheat sheet. First, tax residence in Spain. Stay in Spain for 183 plus days in a calendar year, physically from January 1st to December 31st, and you will be taxed on your worldwide income and assets, potentially, if you're liable. Or non-tax residents, you will be taxed only Spanish income and assets for flat rates, depending on your passport. Second, key tax obligations. Overseas assets reporting, Modelo 720. You have to report your foreign assets value, different categories, bank accounts, investment, real estate, etc., for a threshold of 50,000 euros plus, deadline March 31st. And then you will have to file this every year if there are variations. Then there is the personal income tax, or IRPF, which has a deadline on June 30th for the previous tax year, and it's taxed at, depending on the type of income, from 19% to 47%, progressive tax rates, and investment income from 19 to 30%. Then you have the wealth regional tax, or solidarity national tax, applied to residents and non-residents for Spanish assets, with exemptions depending on the regions, and allowances, as we said, for example, ownership of property. And Madrid and Andalusia, remember, those two regions are the most favorable in terms of these taxes, and also for inheritance and gift tax, something to have in mind. Then you have the special tax regime, also called the Beckham Law, with a flat 24% tax rate. And yes, you will have some pros and cons. This is makes sense for people who are making more than 55,000 euros, because some allowances and deductions won't apply, but you will enjoy a 24% flat rate on the income in Spain, and avoid wealth tax and 720 declaration form, and many other perks. This is the calendar, also a cheat sheet. You can see there in bold letters, personal income tax, wealth tax, solidarity tax form 720. You see the different deadlines. The most important deadline of the year, June 30th, for personal income tax and wealth tax, and 720 March 31st. And if you are lucky enough to be liable for solidarity tax, July 31st. And then you also have other deadlines, other schedule. If you work as an autonomo in Spain, you will have to pay quarterly VAT, quarterly income tax, if you work in Spain as an autonomo. Going back to Spainguru, for the people who join later on, you can use Spainguru for free. You also, with so much content, blog posts, YouTube channel, weekly newsletter, Facebook groups, etc. And you can also find personally vetted professionals with stellar reviews. I have personally recommended the professionals listed on Spainguru for many years, with great reviews and great opinions from people I have referred to. You can find immigration experts, tax advisors, financial planners, visa company, health insurances, etc., etc., etc. All that. Take some time to go on Spainguru and navigate the website. You will find so much more. And if you want to join other Spainguru webinars, there are a few more. You have the Spanish non-lucrative visa that will be actually tomorrow at noon, and moving to Spain, a more general project, like treating the move to Spain as a project, that will be next week. And also, I'm starting a non-lucrative visa Q&A session where I only answer questions without a presentation. That also is happening this week. And always I record these webinars, and if you register and you cannot make it, I will send you a recording, just as I will do from this webinar. And if you want to stay in touch with me, something that will make me extremely happy, always send me an email to hello@Spainguru.es. I always answer my emails, maybe not the first hour or day, but I will answer the email, at least pointing you in the right direction. Join the dedicated Facebook group from Spainguru, watch the YouTube videos, and join the newsletter with the top discussions, most watched video of the week, that is sent every single Monday morning. Again, the content of this webinar is for information purposes only, and it's not tax nor legal advice. Please consult with an experienced tax advisor. Now we're going to move to the Q&A session. And if you haven't done so yet, the only thing I ask in return, if you think the information I provided today, please leave a review on Trustpilot. It takes only 5 seconds of your time, and it will make me so happy that you wouldn't believe it. Thank you so much in advance. Now let's move to the questions. Let's see if I have questions here. I only have one. I have a few questions there, but oh, I don't have any questions because I already answered them. Wow, that's a good sign that the information that I supply in this presentation is relevant. If I'm planning to buy an apartment, I better do that after July 2nd. Wait a second. As you know, the question is a bit, hard to interpret because it's not when you buy the apartment, you better do it after July 2nd. Well, after July 2nd, you will only have 182 days to become a Spanish tax resident. Okay, if you haven't spent any single minute in Spain before that day until January 1st. Okay, so if you buy an apartment earlier, it doesn't matter. You can buy it earlier. You will have to pay transfer tax as a non-resident, or you will have to pay property tax on that property, right? Those taxes you will have to pay in Spain, regardless if you're a Spanish tax resident or not a tax resident, okay, a non-resident, right? So the big issue about property purchases or sales is if you sell a property, you will be eligible or liable, for the capital gains tax in Spain for a sale that happens during the same tax year where you become a Spanish tax resident. That means if you sell in January and you move to Spain in February and you spend the whole year in Spain, that is more than 183 days, Spanish tax authorities will want you to pay capital gains tax on the sale of your property abroad. And that is something that you want to avoid, as we spoke before and I gave you examples. Okay, well, I know it is very early today. I have a lot of signups. I think a lot of people are waiting for the recording. I have more than 100 signups, but not too many attendants. So I really, really appreciate to those early birds who made the effort to wake up early and join today. If you have more questions, make sure to ask them now before I finish. I'm recording this webinar. Check your spam folder if you haven't received a message until before tomorrow, because I will send you the recording as soon as possible. And yeah, that would be it. Stay in touch on by email at least. Send me an email to hello@Spainguru.es, and I will be happy to at least point you in the right direction. Really appreciate you today here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kat K. Thank you, Michael, and everyone else for being today. Stay in touch, and good luck. Take care.